On this week's Dream Deals, we'll be taking a bite out of a piece of Blackpool rock, the TVR Griffith, and also be giving you advice on how to buy your very own Yak Tank. But first...
Until the arrival of the Dodge Viper, the Corvette was the dream of every American car lover. The first Corvette appeared in 1955, powered by an underpowered six-cylinder engine. The second generation, nicknamed Stingray, followed in 1963. Its aggressive styling and much improved chassis brought it true success and a reputation as America's favourite sports car. The third generation suffered at the hands of the oil crisis and dropped 100 brake horsepower. 1984 saw the revival of the C4 with a more modern appearance and powered initially by a 230 horsepower fuel-injected small block, although later C4 variants had power in excess of 300 brake horsepower. This version, the C5 or 5th generation Corvette, was launched in 1998 and was officially the first car to be available in the UK. And at prices starting at around £34,000, it represents a lot of heritage and hardware for your money and appears to be something of a bargain. This Corvette doesn't look a whole lot different to the 4th generation car, but don't be fooled, as in terms of history there is a revolution going on under that cost-saving composite body. You see, for decades Corvette owners didn't mind one jot that their pride and joy could be outhandled by a hot hatch. No, they just wanted their car to be devastatingly fast in the straights. But in the late 1990s, General Motors started to feel differently about their new muscle car. Now, GM's designers developed the C5 from a clean sheet, creating a totally new chassis, which they claim is up to 4.5 times stiffer than its predecessors. This has allowed the suspension to be softened, supposedly providing a smoother ride. But in theory, it shouldn't lose out in the corners. But there's more to this bet than a few chassis tweaks. 90s safety features made it onto the Corvette, so the car not only has ABS and traction control, but also active handling. Active handling means that if the system detects that any one of the 4 wheels is losing grip through the traction control and ABS, the system can apply the brakes to any one of the 4 wheels to regain grip and get the car under control. While the car is electronically advanced, its powertrain is more basic. GM developed a new 5.7 litre pushrod V8, developing nearly 350 brake horsepower. It's not a true old-timer though, since the engine head and block are made out of aluminium. This saved 40 kilograms and improved the car's weight distribution to near perfect front and rear. Should be the best handling Corvette ever then. Find out later in the show and I'll be telling you just how this Vette measures up. The start of the 1990s heralded a new era in car design at TVR. Out went the angular wedge shapes of the 80s and in came the curvy yet brutish shapes of the 1990s. The first car in that era was the Griffith. It was loved by critics and motorists alike. Ladies and gentlemen, the TVR Griffith. The car started production in 1992, originally available with a 240 brake horsepower 4 litre V8 as standard, although many owners opted for the optional 4.3 litre unit. Towards the end of 1993, a new model was launched, the Griffith 500. The engine bored out to 5 litres and 320 brake horsepower. Steve Reed has owned his Griffith for just under 2 years. So first of all, what makes the TVR special for you, Steve?
Firstly, it's British, it's handmade, it's individualist, and the biggest thing, it's got the huge smile factor.
And why this particular model of the Griffith?
At the time, well, it's a pre-catalyst one, so you've not got the problem with catalyst. It sounds better. It's the most powerful one that they made at the time. Simple as that.
What's the performance like?
Probably 0 to 64.5 seconds, but I don't really think that 0 to 60 times are that relevant. I think that its mid-range performance is the performance of a car, the ability to overtake on an A road safely, and I think 0 to 60 times you can make absolutely anything do a quick 0 to 60 times. That doesn't make it a quick car.
Whichever Griffith you opt for, the performance is phenomenal. Early 4-litre cars will cover the 0 to 60 dash in just over 5 seconds, while the brutal Griffith 500 will do it in just over 4. And if your nerve will hold, will keep on accelerating until nearly 170 miles per hour. Now, obviously TVR has an image, and it's not true, but it's the public conception that, you know, it is made in a shed in Blackpool by, you know, a man called Burt with a hammer. Does that ever cross your mind as you're hurtling into a corner?
No, never ever. The TVRs are totally over-engineered.
Although the last run of Griffith 500s weighs in at just over £36,000, we found an early 4-litre model for £12,995. A lot of performance for the money. So before you buy one of these, Steve, would you recommend people get specialist advice?
Yes, I think if you're buying any specialist car, you should get specialist advice. Go to a specialist dealer or a franchise dealer. Probably join the car club and speak to other owners. Get somebody to check the car out if you're not really sure what the quirks are in the car. Every car has its quirks. HPI the car, they do get damaged and badly repaired. Lots of people buy them on finance and there's finance outstanding, so just the normal things that you check with a normal car, but you know, get a specialist to help you.
Would you ever consider an alternative to TVR, and what are they?
I've had all sorts of things over the years. I've had Porsches, I had a Honda NSX, all sorts of things. I've probably driven most things, but there's nothing really that'll do what a TVR will do for the money.
There are a few true modern competitors to the TVR Griffith, unless of course you consider TVR's own Chimera or some of the older models. From other manufacturers there is of course the Corvette that we're testing this week, and possibly the MGR V8 from the early 90s or BMW's M Roadster. This car is fantastic value for money. First of all, what did you pay for this car?
It was £20,000 when I bought it.
That's a lot of car for your money, isn't it?
It's an awful lot of car for your money. And it's still probably nearly worth that now. They tend to depreciate, as do most things, for 4 or 5 years, the TVRs, and then they stay there, so this car will always be that kind of value for money.
What is it about driving the car that makes it feel like a TVR? In terms of the cabin and, you know, this massive central console?
Every TVR I've ever owned feels like a TVR. It's a characteristic of TVRs. You could get into a 1962 one, and you get into a new Cerberus, and they've all got that family feel about them.
Family feel isn't something that occurred to me when I got in, to be honest with you, Steve.
I know people who've conceived children in these.
Conceived, didn't you? Must have been the crankies.
The girls got to want to.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I don't know where I'd put my legs, but there you go. Would you recommend it to other people, the whole TVR experience?
TVRs are not for everybody. You don't need a TVR, you want one. They're not for everybody. You've got to want to drive this kind of car. Most people prefer a Golf or a Mondeo, but you know, that's why people buy TVRs, because it's an individualist car.
The TVR Griffith. A quintessentially English sports car, low on sophistication but high on performance and styling. TVR have announced that the replacement is going to be launched later this year and are taking orders on the last 100, so get your orders in now while you can. As for me, I'm going to be getting the bus. I'll see you later.
In the last few years, there's been an increase in the popularity of American cars. Just think how many Ford Explorers and Jeep Cherokees you see every day. But what is it about these modern Yank tanks that has captured our imagination like never before?
I think in the UK, American cars offer individuality at a reasonable cost, and I think for people that want to make a statement, certainly in the £20,000–30,000 bracket, it's very hard to find something that's a little unusual today. And some vehicles are unique, particularly pickup trucks, where nothing either from the Japanese or European competes with American trucks. They're quite unique. The main difference between American and European cars are, with American cars, you will tend to get a greater degree of longevity. The cars are built to withstand extremes of conditions, both heat and cold. When the manufacturers in the States release a car, they don't know whether it's going to Alaska at -20–30 degrees or sitting in Palm Springs at 120 degrees. So the cars will tend to accept these extremes of use, and of necessity that has to put a level of reliability, even corrosion resistance into them, which you wouldn't normally find in European cars. So in the UK certainly, most of our product is running very lightly, low stressed, if anything over-engineered, and provided you buy a good machine, it will last you many years. Over the last few years, it's clear that the pickup trucks have become very interesting to a lot of people, and I suspect a lot of people see them in the States, they holiday there, and they see these things and they just think, wow, you know, a truck with air conditioning, automatic, power seats, electric windows, cruise control, a lot of equipment, a lot of individuality, and something unusual. New prices start at around £20,000, and you can pay past 30 for some of the high-spec trucks. The cars are still good value for money and tend to hover around the £20,000 to £25,000 for Camaros and Firebirds. Corvettes, 30,000 up to about 45.
With an increased number of European spec models available, it's becoming easier to get your hands on a piece of American metal. If you don't mind high mileage, you could pick up an M-Reg Jeep Cherokee for $7,000 or an R-Edge Explorer for $10,500. But if you fancy something a bit different, you could try a Chevrolet Camaro. We found a 98 model for £9,500.
I would say to anyone, unless you had a lot of knowledge, better to buy from a dealer. You've got a lot of protection, and you would or should buy only with a warranty, and from a dealer that has some knowledge. And there are quite a lot of specialist dealers now in the UK who really just deal in Americana, and some of those are good guys and want people to enjoy what they're buying. And if you buy with a good warranty and a good car with a good service history, you will enjoy it very much. The image of gas-guzzling American cars is mostly gone now. Many people drive them in the States, so they don't really need me as one of the dealers to tell you that. Many of the cars now are surprisingly economical, despite the large engines, mainly because they're low revving, very high torque and rev low down. And I think this gives them the longevity and fuel economy. There are still gas-guzzling cars out there, but they tend to be fairly obvious. Usually the trucks and with big V10 engines, 8-litre engines, they inevitably, you will pay the price for that if that's what gives you pleasure. But the mainstream American cars, the sports cars, a lot of the pickup trucks, certainly below 6 litres, are remarkably economical. My personal proviso is I personally wouldn't buy cars from America and ship them across unless you have a lot of knowledge or know who you're dealing with. Some of the stories I hear, the sad ones unfortunately, are usually where they've bought a car unseen in America and shipped it across. That can be very disappointing, and I think you probably wouldn't do that in the UK. Would you buy blind from someone 300 miles away and have it sent to your home having paid for it first? The answer is probably no. So sometimes it surprises me that people will do that.
Now, if you ask people to name one American car, chances are their reply would be the Corvette. Ever since its launch, the Corvette has become the symbol of the best that the American car industry has to offer. But what is its enduring appeal?
Representing freedom and power, performance, the open road, and it's become a great car with a lot of history, and he's very special, and in fairness has become a worldwide car now. You see them in every country, and there's a keen and enthusiastic following. Yeah, I mean, for example, this is a 96 convertible. A car that's only done 43,000 miles. It's pretty low mileage for the age. We would sell this for about £12,000. And whoever gets this car is good value for money, very reliable, and to a lot of people in Europe, this is when they started to see Corvettes in some volume. So this is quite a well-known car. You'll see a few on the roads, got a good enthusiast following, no real reliability issues, and with just sensible maintenance will give somebody a lot of great service, not too expensive. You certainly wouldn't dare buy a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or possibly even a Mercedes at this sort of price, and you get an awful lot of car for your money that's very distinctive and will give a guy a lot of pleasure.
When the Corvette was officially launched in the UK in 1998, prices for these models started at around £35,000. Used prices for these models start at around 22 grand, but if you look around you can find earlier imported models. We found a 1995 model with 23,000 miles, valued at around £18,000.
As with most cars, if you look after the car, it will always bring a bigger price than a car that's neglected. Problems with Corvettes, if they get tatty inside, that will affect it. And it's the interiors that we tend to worry about with Corvettes. If a car is looked after, it will depreciate quite slowly. There aren't a lot of cars in the UK, so they're keenly sought after. So we've always got probably a waiting list for the majority of these cars now in second hand, and they're very easy to move along so long as it's a nice, clean, well looked after motor, and I think that is the real key. Servicing costs are quite minimal, and although the car, most people's perception is that a Corvette would be expensive to maintain, but it's important to remember that these cars are built at the rate of around 25,000 a year, which is a lot of cars, but America's an enormous country, and to us that's a lot of cars, but spread over the States it isn't really. But because of that, parts are cheap for them. We do a 36-hour delivery service anyway. A lot of service items we keep in stock. Maintenance is quite easy, and also it's quite easy to do yourself, and I do notice quite a lot of our more enthusiastic owners will do quite a lot of their own work. But so long as you're looking after the brakes and the mechanical bits on the car, tyres and brakes and steering, you really are, looking at quite low maintenance and low cost.
So whatever US car you buy, you can be sure that although the styling might be a bit bland, it'll be big enough, loud enough, and have the power to let you know you're getting plenty of car for your bucks.
In the first part, we looked at Chevrolet's 5th generation Corvette. Well, we've kept you waiting long enough. Let's find out how it drives. When you first get in the Corvette, the first thing you may or may not notice is the subtle use of red leather everywhere. That and the very finely handcrafted plastic that abounds. But the Corvette isn't about the way it looks, or is it? No, it's about the way it drives. The LT1 engine produces a punchy 344 brake horsepower. The big Yank hits 60 miles per hour in around 5 seconds and onto a top speed of 175 miles per hour. The Corvette is absolutely fearsome. It's a wolf in wolf's clothing. There's an awful lot of brake horsepower, and with the traction control system off, you can have a lot of fun. But it's very flattering. Be warned, you can lose it. But I'm not going to. Now, as for the handling, I think General Motors have got it quite right. It does feel firm, and it will go into the corners, and it will do what you want to do, and it's very predictable when the back end goes out, very easy to correct. But it's still just slightly spongy, and it's still just too big for me. Give me a British sports car over this, but they're probably a lot more expensive. The automatic gearbox is, as you'd imagine, American, and it kind of takes a second to respond. But once you're up and going, it's great. The brakes, now I was a bit worried about the brakes because they like to go fast in a straight line, but they don't like to stop. But the Americans have done the trick with this. The brakes are excellent. Now the Corvette is of course made for the American market where their roads are as wide as their obese girths. But here in England we're a little bit more trim and the lanes are quite narrow. So if you're going into a curve in the Corvette and there's a bus coming towards you, close your eyes and keep left. Now fuel consumption on the Corvette is amazing. It's got a 5.7 V8 litre and yet it'll do 60 miles per gallon. Will it Buxton's? It'll do 20 if you're lucky, but if you're buying a 5.7 litre car, you're probably not bothered about fuel consumption. The big question is, does it represent good value for money? Well, £34,000 while cheap is still a lot of money. You could buy a decent second-hand Ferrari for that, and let's be snobbish about it, that badge is going to impress a whole load more girls, a whole load more. Unless, of course, she's an all-American gal going to the prom, in which case get yourself a Corvette. Corvette ownership starts at £34,000 for the coupe and rises to $38,000 for the convertible. In comparison, this Corvette lacks some of the Viper's venom, but it's as American as 5.7 litres of Mum's apple pie. But it lacks sophistication. But if you're flash, brash and have got the cash, then the Corvette is probably the car for you. Having said all of that, sophisticated or not, you try and get it off me.
Join us on the next Dream Deals when we'll be putting Lotus's second generation Elise through its paces, and we also take a look at the very rare Lotus Europa.